the probability that you're going to turn something that causes you that much discomfort into a long-term habit is greatly reduced.
Yeah.
So, you want to do something that you're actually able to stick to for the long run and not something that, you're going to do for 3 weeks and then say, well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Better Basics Podcast, episode 4. I'm Matt Stone with my best friend in the world, Dylan Waldhuter. Dylan, what's happening today, man?
Matt, we just recorded about 15 minutes of this episode
I wasn't going to
with,
tell him.
well, we didn't record we just had a 15-minute conversation that we thought we were recording that we realized we didn't. So
Well,
we're gonna have another go at it. We're gonna do even better. We just got to practice.
this is it. You just reps and sets. And that leads us well into the topic that we are talking about today. So Dylan, why don't you tell us what are we talking about?
We're calling it "You Just Got to the Gym, Now What?" So what we want to discuss is the types of things that you should be thinking about and that you'll face as you progress through your fitness journey that may feel a bit confusing or new, to give you what you need to feel equipped and confident in going to the gym. So I think from my perspective, having gone through kind of a self-guided fitness journey, this is the type of podcast episode I wish I had access to, that I could have listened to the first time I went into the gym, to be able to kind of decipher through the lingo and the types of things that just took me a little too long to digest and understand, that would have really been beneficial to me that first time I walked into the gym to focus on strength training.
Yeah. So I mean, you just got your your training program. Maybe it's the basic muscle, or maybe it's something else that you found, and you're looking at all the exercises, you're looking at the at all the different numbers on the pages, and it might feel a little overwhelming at first, or maybe maybe it's something that you have a basic idea, but it always helps to have a little bit deeper of an understanding. So yeah, I mean, that's such an important thing for people when they're just getting started. And so what I like to think about first, for me, is the exercises. And because at the end of the day, no matter what you're doing, no matter how much weight you're lifting or how little weight you're lifting, if you're doing an exercise with good form, and you do enough reps of it, you will see physical change. And so, for me, it's what types of movements are we doing to evoke that change, as quickly as possible. And at the end of the day, it all boils down to the big four, the four major movements, which, I mean, I know it. It's the squat, the hinge, pushes, and pulls. And so no matter what, no matter what exercises you have on your list for that day, you should be able to categorize them in one of those four types of movements.
Yeah, and these are really kind of fundamental functional movements that human beings are meant to have, right? I think we lose the ability to do them well, and the ability to be strong in these movement patterns, because of what a normal life requires today, which is often a desk where you're not really sitting optimally. We're not spending any time on the ground any longer, playing or sitting on the ground. We're sitting in a chair with our shoulders hunched forward. And so, I mean, if you watch a kid play, a child, you'll see them pop down into a squat, sit there ass to grass, and play with their Legos for hours.
Mm-hmm.
If I, even now, years into strength training and trying to get better and better at that movement pattern, were to try to do that, I'd maybe last 15 seconds before I'd have to take a break. And it's just because of all the time I spend sitting and not really practicing and getting away from the fundamentals of those movement patterns.
And conversely, look at an elder, somebody significantly older than us that grew up in a society where that was a resting position, that deep squat. And usually you see it with a lot of Asian in
Mm-hmm.
Asian countries. It is one of those things where you have people that a lot of times are a lot more comfortable dropping down into that deep squat as a resting position. And so, whether it's, I guess, and the point here is it's not something that has to be lost,
Yeah.
because a child can do it and now you can't do it anymore. It doesn't have to be that way.
How about a hinge, right?
Right.
How many of our own friends do we know that have hurt their back picking up, a grocery bag off of the ground? I mean, and a lot of that is because we've lost the movement pattern that's required to efficiently hinge over and pick something up off the ground. It's not because we just like to say, oh, I'm just getting old. It's like, shit, man,
Right.
you're 32 years old. So it's important to not only kind of relearn these movement patterns, but to get strong in them as well, so that, when you're years from now, you got a grandkid, you want to be able to pick that kid up and play with him, and you want to be able to do it without hurting yourself. So there's so much opportunity in these movement patterns to both practice and improve them on their own, but then to load them in strength training exercises to get stronger in them as well.
You sparked something in my brain, and I want to talk this out and see if it makes
Yeah.
sense. So these four movements really are, when we think about restorative exercises, these really, because you see it nowadays where and that's kind of like one of the new things that is all over all these like mobility specialists, and mobility is great. And being able to internally rotate and externally rotate at the hips, and there's so much benefits to mobility training. But just like the strength training game, it's gotten so far in the weeds and trying to be so special and out there that you're creating these programs that look cool. You see knees over toes guy, and that's not to say that his system doesn't work, but a lot of it is, look at me, look at this cool stuff I can do. Let me show you how I was able to get here. And really, at the end of the day, the best restorative movements are these four main movements. If you are squatting, hinging, pushing, and pulling with good form, your posture will be better, your low back pain will disappear, and your rate of injury, your potential for injury in everyday life will go down drastically. Does that make
100%.
sense?
It makes so much sense. Yeah. And it's we'll talk at the end, I think, maybe a bit more about coming into the gym for the first time with a kind of a clear goal and allowing those goals to evolve over time. If you haven't been in the gym for a while and you have a hard time squatting, or you've hurt your back recently bending over to pick something up, or you sit in a desk all day with your shoulders rolled forward and don't really build strength in sort of more of a pull, retracted sort of movement, an early good goal, to your point, might just be to take these simple movement patterns and try to get better at them, right? And in doing so, create the foundation to get strong in them over time.
Yeah, well, but that's where, when I'm designing a program, and if you have looked at the basic home, it's very apparent that, all we're trying to do is get you moving in these, with these movement patterns. And then from there, we figure out how to load it. But at the base level is, how do you squat? How do you hinge? How do you push? And how do you pull? Right now, and then how do we use the knowledge that we have as as coaches and trainers to get the most out of that and to get you to progress faster.
Yeah, so the first thing you really want to think about is, how do I do these movements correctly and well? So we have some YouTube resources available that go through these different movement patterns to help you kind of establish them. The worst thing you could do is go to the gym for the first time, not have that squat movement pattern figured out, throw some weight on a barbell, put that on your back, and start squatting. You might get stronger, but if you're not getting stronger in the functional pattern of a squat the correct way, you're going to hurt yourself more than you're going to help yourself over time. So
Well,
let's get the movement pattern right first. Yeah.
there becomes a point where the structure cannot handle the load, no matter how strong you've gotten structurally. You've built that muscle on shitty foundation,
Yeah.
and no matter how strong that muscle is, at some point, there's going to be some breakage in it. It's just,
Yeah.
it is the way it is.
Yeah.
And so you have these four major movements, and with those movements, it's all basically within the six major muscle groups, right?
Yep. Yeah. So we're going to look at exercising the chest. We're going to look at exercising our back, and that's going to be kind of our push and pull focused movements. We'll look at exercising our arms, biceps and triceps. We'll look at exercising our shoulders, our legs. So that's where a lot of the squat and hinge stuff comes into play. And then we'll look at our core as well, which you like to talk about as kind of the foundation for all of this.
Yeah, I mean, the core is one of those things that it cannot be removed from any of these other exercises. It all should be chest and, back and arms and, etc. All of those and core. Even in a machine, even if you're using an externally stable machine, you're still engaging your core alongside those other muscles. So, you and I have our general philosophy about core, which is, if you are, lifting enough, if you're doing enough strength training, and functional movements within that strength training, you're getting adequate core. You can always call for more, and there are some really great direct core exercises that we like to use. But for the most part, if you're using a properly written and followed strength training program, the core, direct core, your crunches and planks and whatnot, are just kind of a bonus.
Yeah, I think most people think core or abs, and they think of doing as many sit-ups as possible. I think my favorite core exercise is a heavy deadlift, right?
Yeah.
Like that works the core so incredibly well. So this core is really more than the showy abs. It's really it's a really core component of overall strength. And I think you'll find, to your point, that as you're doing a lot of these different movements and focusing on these different muscle groups, that the core is going to be a component of all of them, which leads us, I think, to this conversation around compound exercises and movements versus more isolation focused exercises and movements. And so in the program, as you take it to the gym, you're going to see both of these kind of programmed in there in a way. And compound movements are going to be those that target multiple muscle groups, right? So the deadlift, for example, you're working your legs, you're working your core, you're working your back. That's a compound movement in that it's pretty strength focused, and it's going to give you the ability to target multiple muscle groups in that hinge movement pattern. Something like a bicep curl is going to be more of an isolation movement or exercise where you're really just targeting one muscle group at a time. And so that's, it's an arm exercise, but your arm's made up of multiple muscles. And when you're doing a bicep curl, you're really seeking to target that bicep specifically. So important to know that a good program should typically include both to some degree, and that there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be a little bit more compound dominant.
Yeah.
That would be where, most people would consider like the bang for your buck, right? If you're looking
Makes sense.
If you're looking for an efficient way to, tire out the most muscle groups the quickest. But what I think more important to me in, than how many compound lifts versus isolations are in a program. It's how you order them.
Mhm.
So that's one of those things that it seems like super basic, but it is so incredibly important when we're looking for the long-term success for somebody in the gym. Is what order are we putting these exercises
Mhm.
in, and making sure, something like a squat or a deadlift, these big compound movements, we want to put those first. We want to put
Yeah.
that ahead of the isolation exercises, because and I'm going to dovetail a little bit too and say that's also why, if we're going to do direct core training, we want to save this for the end of our workout, because those compound lifts are going to require a lot of core strength,
Mhm.
and then also those multiple muscle groups working in conjunction to make that exercise possible. Whereas something like an isolation exercise and then going into direct core after is something where it's okay if that muscle is already a little bit fatigued, because it's usually going to be a safer setup and something that isn't going to have nearly as much load.
Yeah, you bet. So just again, I think highlights the importance of having a good program. I spent so many years going to the gym and just going exercise machine to exercise machine, feeling sore the next day, and seeing zero progress over time. And what a good program is going to do is it's going to hit on all these movement patterns. It's going to give you an opportunity to build all these major muscle groups. It's going to be programmed in a way that is most efficient and best for you, from the kind of compound exercises up front to the isolation exercises on the back end. And it's going to give you structure to progress. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it ultimately means to progress. But as somebody who's tried so much in this fitness world to achieve the results that I want to, I want to say this is it's the best results I've ever gotten, and it's the easiest thing I've ever done, is just to show up and strength train, track my progress, try to get a little bit better. And it takes some time, but you ultimately do, I think, realize more benefit than if you are to just kind of, it's sort of, I think maybe this is something worth talking about quickly, is the difference between training and exercising. We may have hit on it a bit in a previous podcast, but what
I'm
we're
sure we'll talk
after,
about it a bunch more, because
probably,
it's super
yeah,
important.
what we're after here is more strength training. There's nothing wrong with exercising. It's in fact quite good for you. So if you want to go to the gym and go exercise machine to exercise machine and move your body and try to get a little stronger, you can, but that's not going to be the most effective way to do it. It's not going to be the way to realize the best results. What we really want to focus more on here is strength training, which is a programmed, progressively focused structure to help you realize real outcomes and benefits.
Yeah, and we can. There's definitely going to be the time to get deeper into this, because it's something that I think we both have a lot to say about. But quickly, it's also one of those things where so training on the macro perspective is having a plan when you get to the gym. So that that's part of training, getting there with a program that has goals in mind, going in there, showing up, plan of attack. When it comes to the actual workout, there is training versus exercise, even within a program too, right? Because you're training your squat. That squat is something that you need to constantly be practicing. Big movement with a bunch of potential risk if done poorly. And then you have things like a leg press or hamstring curl, leg extension. And that's, again, getting back to machines and things with a lot of external support. And those are things where you can just kind of go at it, like attack it. But you still need to hop on those machines and those exercises with that macro training in mind. Otherwise, you're not going to know how hard to push it, how many reps to do, where your weight should be and where you are going to start next week. So,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that training is is partially is that preparedness before you even get to the gym.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah. So training's made up of micro exercises, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exercising is doing those micro exercises without that structure that you just highlighted. Is that a
Right.
fair way of saying this?
Yeah, no, I
So,
think exactly. So I
so you
mean,
want,
that's kind of like getting deep into the weeds, but these are the types of things that you don't necessarily have to think about on a daily basis, but like as long as you understand that concept, it's going to help you progress so much faster because you're doing something with a goal as opposed to just doing it because, well, I want to look good. That is a good goal, but like, how are you going to do that?
yeah,
Do you want your arms to get bigger? You want your legs to get bigger? Both? Are we looking to build muscle, burn body fat? What is the reason why we're in the gym today?
yeah, yeah, you bet. I like that a lot. So
Yeah.
you got your program, you're in the gym, you've got a good understanding of the movement patterns, the different exercises, and you want to start training. You want to start strength training to achieve a specific goal. You're going to open up that program. You got it printed out, or you've got it downloaded on your phone, and you're going to see a series of these micro exercises, right? It's going to be programmed through these different compound and isolation exercises. And that's things like the deadlift, the squat, the bench press, the bicep curl, whatever it might be. Those are those micro exercises, but they're programmed in a way to be most effective, which we just highlighted. And what you're going to see is that for each exercise you're going to do on a given day, there's going to be a defined number of both sets and reps. And so the sets are how many times you're going to do a defined number of repetitions for each of these exercises with some period of rest in between. So let's use the bench press, for example. If it says bench press is your micro exercise, it says you're going to do 3 sets. That means you're going to bench press 3 separate times with some rest period in between. The reps will define how many repetitions of that bench press movement you're going to do within that given exercise. So bench press, 3 sets, 10 reps. That means you're going to do the bench press exercise 3 times. Each time you do, you're going to do 10 repetitions of said bench press, and you're going to rest in between those sets.
Mm-hmm.
Is that clear?
I mean, yeah, I think so. But so it's one of those things where the the sets is how many times you are going to be, in the case of a bench press, you're going to be picking the dumbbells up off the ground and putting them onto your chest. It's how many times you're starting the exercise. The reps are once you've started the exercise, how many times are you going to do it before you set those weights down again?
Yeah, it's a good
Uh,
way to say it. I like that. Mm-hmm.
well, it's because you got into the details. I could really go and
You're
just
the
toss,
you're the trainer
toss,
here, man.
toss the ground ball to first. So yeah, I mean, and that those reps and sets can come in a variety of different ways. Early on, what you'll notice is probably something, especially if the program is designed for a beginner and it's not and its one goal is not to get that beginner as sore as possible, because there are programs like that where they want to make it as hard as they possibly can early on so that after day 1 you're like, holy crap, this is working my muscles like crazy. That's called overtraining, and you're going to end up hurting yourself and or just not wanting to do it ever
Yeah,
again because
if
it's miserable.
and let's point out now that soreness is not a good indication of successful training, right?
No, no,
I
you
mean,
want to feel.
it's likely the first time you do anything under load, you're going to experience some soreness. But if you're a week into your program and you're still super sore from the exercise you did or the session you did 2 days ago, you're probably overtraining a bit, and too much of a good thing can start to be a
It's
bad
going to be
thing too.
bad. And
Yeah,
one, I mean, yeah, you can get hurt in general, but two, even if you don't get hurt, you're not going to see the progress that you get if your body
right.
is well rested. And also the the I guess the probability that you're going to turn something that causes you that much discomfort into a long-term habit is greatly reduced.
Yeah.
So, you want to do something that you're actually able to stick to for the long run, and not something that, you're going to do for 3 weeks and then say, well, I tried.
Which
And
again comes back to the importance of a good program.
100%.
And yeah, so again, it's really follow the program, trust the program. These programs
Yeah.
are written.
Yeah, like they're written so that you feel what you're supposed to feel and still be able to, one, train the next time you're supposed to train,
Yep.
but two, still be able to live your life. I tell all of my clients when we're first getting started out, I expect you to feel sore, and you should expect you to feel sore. But if that soreness is prohibiting you from doing anything that you normally do and enjoy in your day-to-day life, then we fucked up.
You've done too
And we
much.
need
Yeah.
to look at the the program, and we need to look at how we can adjust it and scale it, and maybe scale back even to see, how we can stimulate that muscle growth without going too far. So, what you'll notice in a lot of well-designed programs for beginners is low sets, high reps. And that high rep can be anywhere from, honestly, like 15 to 30. And the reason is because those reps and doing them one after another continuously is going to develop that movement pattern so that you can learn to do the exercise well. Early
Yeah.
on, it is about practicing the skill.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about how much weight you can do, it's how well can you move the weight that's in your hands. And
Yeah.
so, these high rep, low sets, in order to, one, allow you to, work the muscle without overtraining, but then also giving you the opportunity to do a number of different exercises.
Yep.
Because if you want to sit there and do 4 sets of 20 on the bench press, if you take adequate rest, you're going to be there for a while.
Yeah.
And the goal here, I know how we both like to train, is 45 minutes to an hour 15, in and out, get your exercises done, get on with your day. And so, you don't necessarily, especially early on, want to get bogged down with a ton of sets, but those high reps give you an opportunity to practice a skill.
Yeah, you bet. It important to note that I don't know who said it, but I really like to think about um training this way. And I think for years I didn't think about training this way. You're not building muscle or progressing when you're working out. You're building muscle and progressing when you're recovering after that workout. So
Yeah.
you want to stimulate your body and muscles just enough to elicit that response that you're desiring. And too much, you're not going to see what you want. Too little, you're not going to see what you want. And so a good strength training program is going to offer, and really, I think more important than anything, is often finding a good trainer is going to help you kind of distill through what the adequate dose of training is to help you realize the best results possible. The way that we do that in a out of the box strength training program like Basic Muscle is by organizing each of these designated numbers of sets and reps in rep ranges. And so you'll notice that there's a range. It'll be 10 to 15 repetitions. And what we're ultimately going towards to ensure that we aren't overtraining is not, and there's a time and place for failure, but certainly not early on, is to train to a point where there's like 2 in the tank. Is that how we talk about it?
That's what I like. And you hear some people say like reps in reserve, RIR. You'll see
Yep.
that on some training programs. There's also RPE, the rate of perceived exertion. That one is a
A little
little
more complicated. Yeah.
whatever. But RIR, reps in reserve, or how we like to phrase it is just however many got left in the tank.
Yeah.
And ideally, you want to feel like when you're racking it that you definitely had one, and you probably could have gotten 2.
Yeah.
And that's a good place to start. Now, that doesn't mean that you're always going to nail it. Sometimes, especially early on, most people do not understand how strong they are once they start moving the weight properly,
Mm-hmm.
because that it gets in their head. They're like, ooh, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. I'm really tired. This is hurting. And it's just because it's been a while since those muscles have been under that kind of tension. So you learn to push past that, pain, whatever we can call it pain, whatever, burn, whatever, however you want to phrase it. And you start to get comfortable in that discomfort. Um, but so maybe there will be that time early on where you racked it and you realize I probably could have done, 5 more or
Yeah.
6 more.
Yeah.
That's a good indicator that it's time to go up and wait. Or the other side of that is, you were really pushing to get to, let's say the rep range is, an 8 to 12, and you were really, really struggling. You just got up that 8th rep. And especially if you have more sets left to go, that for the rest of that day, it may, be smart to look at it with a little bit of humility and say, let's drop this weight. Let's focus on how can I make these lighter dumbbells feel a little bit heavier? How can I make sure that my movement pattern is as perfect as it can possibly be, and try to hit the top of that rep range. And then once you've really owned the top of that range, you then know, okay, let's go back down and see, how we can build up from there.
Yeah, so you'll hear people talk about progressive overload, right? So what is a good measure for success? I love to focus on strength over time, right? So don't look at the scale. Don't, you can look in the mirror and you'll realize body changes over time, but that takes some time. An objective, easy thing to focus on that will give you shorter term wins is just to focus on getting stronger, right? And so you'll hear progressive overload to be a good way to kind of track and determine that you are getting stronger over time. So in that 8 to 12 rep range, you're doing the bench press, you're doing it at 135 pounds, you get up to the 12 end of that rep range, right? And now it's time to put some more weight on the bar. And by tracking that and monitoring that over time, now you have 145 on the bar, but you only get to 8, and you keep working until you get that 145 pounds up to 12 reps. And now you throw a little more weight on the bar. A really good way to just monitor that you're objectively getting stronger if you can lift more weight, but also ensure that you're providing the necessary stimulus to adapt to grow your muscle over time.
Yeah, I do caution people to, to not think that the weight is the only way to track success, though. You don't want to be sitting there and say, well, I did, 135 last week. This week I have to do 140, because
good point.
it's a good goal, and the weight, I heard, the Mind Punk guys say this, and when they said this, it resonated with me so deep. They said that weight should be the last thing that a trainer manipulates to make an exercise harder.
Yeah.
So and so, when we think about, and I guess to kind of make it, to tie it in with your point about progressive overload, is doing one extra rep at that same weight this week
You've gotten
is a
stronger.
win.
Yeah, you've gotten stronger. Yeah.
You've gotten stronger. And so you will start to see, once you dominated the top of that rep range, you will start to, make it clear, okay, I can go up 5 pounds. I might get knocked down to the bottom of this rep range. I can safely build from there.
Yeah, good point. Nothing to rush through, for sure.
But it's just going together, because people, especially the untrained person, thinks the only way that I'm truly succeeding is by putting more weight on the bar, when that's BS. If you can do 1 rep more than you did last week, you have increased your volume and you are getting stronger.
You bet.
And I promise, if you can, and so if you can just marry those two, reps first, then weight, and then just kind of make that, that circle. I'm going to increase my reps to the top of the range. I'm going to up the weight. Now I'm going to go back down and come back around. And you can train just like that for the rest of your life.
That's all I do. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be that simple. It's
Yeah.
just top of the rep range, add a little bit of weight, go back down, and just the circle with weights.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great way to train. So, and the way to ensure that you're doing it safely is to keep that. I always keep that 2 in the tank in the back of my mind. One to 2 in the tank. I don't need
Mhm.
to fail. I don't need to do it to the point where I can't either push the weight up any further, or that just can get you in trouble. It's a recipe for injury. There's a time and place for it in more advanced training. But I
Yeah.
think if you're working in those rep ranges and trying to progress in the way you just defined, while keeping that in the back of your mind, you're going to put yourself on a pretty good path to training in a fashion to build muscle over time.
Well, and I think this is a good spot to do a quick plug for us, because a lot of these exercises, they're more complex than we give them credit for, or at the
Mhm.
very least, there are optimal setups to give yourself the best chance to succeed with these exercises. Everybody thinks that they can just do a bench press. Everybody
Mhm.
just thinks, oh, I know how to squat, especially if you have trained before. If you have any weight room experience, you feel like you can hop under a bar and start bench pressing.
Yeah.
But if you take the time to learn how to do these exercises correctly, you're going to you're going to be able to shake off that injury bug that bites so many people when they get back into training. But then also you're going to see your progress really, start to snowball as the time goes on. And fortunately for our listeners, if you go to our YouTube channel, you're going to find a whole bunch of videos, tutorials on how to set up for, pretty much definitely every exercise that we program in our programs. But there's a bunch of other stuff in there too.
Yeah, and I think a great resource. We've got stuff in there as well that is probably easier to communicate by video than in this podcast format. So
Totally.
things like breathing and bracing were things that early on when I was first getting into the gym was confusing. You hear people communicate it in a million different ways, and I think it's just important to note in this podcast format that there are optimal ways to do it, not to overthink it, and that we have some resources available on YouTube to kind of go through it a bit further. Is there anything you want to say on the breathing, bracing front that helps your clients when they're first getting into the gym?
Dude, how much time do we have? But I
Yeah.
mean, like real briefly, the way the elevator pitch for exercise and breath is when we're just starting out, relatively high rep work, practicing these movements, focus on breath as little as possible. Just make sure you're breathing.
Just breathe.
And you have so many people that you can hear them, with lifting barely any weight at all, and they're exhaling like like they've got a semi truck on their stomach that they have to, that's crushing their kid and their cat. And it's just like one of those things where when the weight is relatively low and the reps are relatively high, let your breathing just do what it does, and don't focus on it too much. Focus on the movement patterns, focus on actually breathing. But you don't want to obsess over core brace, because you're actually pulling a little bit of work and exertion out of those muscles, because your core does an excellent job of doing some of it for you. So make sure that you're not obsessing over the brace early. And then as the weight starts to get heavier later on in sets, and you got to tighten it up a little bit, you can control your breathing. A really simple way to do things is, to inhale on the eccentric, and that's when you're loading a movement. So going down in a squat, or bringing the bar down on a chest press, breathing in as you go down, kind of loading up that brace. And then once you hit that bottom, using that breath to kind of explode the weight up. But just understand that the more you are involving that brace, the less you are actually working the muscles in, those muscles directly, because your core is helping. And in something like a heavy squat, you need that
You want the
brace. With
core
a
to help.
heavy deadlift,
You
if
want
you're
the
going
core
to
to help.
PR on a deadlift, you best have your brace in check
You
and
need
the
your whole ass body to do that.
your
Yeah.
whole ass
So
body.
you want to engage that core. Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to act like somebody's going to punch you in the stomach.
I
So,
like that.
instead of, sometimes we think we're going to, puff our chest out. That's how we brace is right. Puff our chest out. But really, when we think about what the function of our core muscles are, at the end of the day, it is to protect the spine and the organs that are underneath that core. And so, you want to draw that core in tight, kind of suck it in and flatten it out. And you also should think about your core as, 360. It's not just your six pack muscles, right? You have, those core muscles go all around, all around your trunk, and you need to bring those together to stabilize the spine as much as possible.
Yeah, when the weights get heavy for me, I actually like to hold I hold my breath basically through the
Totally, yeah.
movement. So if I'm squatting, I'll take that breath in at the top and sort of almost kind of like, to your point, that 360-degree breath, almost try to push that belly out a little bit and get strong in the core. And then I'll hold that through the entire eccentric and concentric motion. Exhale at the top, breathe that back in. But again, to your point, that's for heavy weight where you have to activate that central nervous system and really engage your whole body to achieve these heavier weights. I think that breathing and breath, for the most part, especially in some of the higher rep ranges at lower weights, it's not as important as you may have heard, or I had certainly heard in the past, where it was life or death whether you were breathing in on the eccentric and breathing out on the concentric or not.
No, just make sure you're breathing is the most important thing. You shouldn't be holding your breath unless you're really, digging deep in some of those heavier lifts. So
we're getting a little long here, and there's maybe just a couple more things I think we should hit on quick that we had here in our notes. The one around frequency, volume, and intensity, I think we can cover pretty quickly. And I'll maybe even throw in an image in the podcast just so people can kind of visualize what this all means. It's just worth knowing, right? So different ways that you can manipulate your training over time. And so we've talked about sets, reps, rep ranges, different weights, how to figure out how much weight to use. There's frequency, which is how often you're hitting a specific muscle group. And as we've already noted, not enough, you're not going to see the progression you want. Too much, you're not going to see the progression you want. So there's optimal amounts of frequency. Then there is both volume and intensity. And so the way to think about volume is to simply multiply the number of sets you're doing by the number of reps you're doing by the amount of weight that you're doing. That'll give you your total volume for that given exercise. So if you are doing bicep curls what's a good exercise to use an example? Let's say you're doing a bench press and you're doing three sets of 10 reps at 100 pounds. 3 times 10 times 100 is 3,000. That's your total volume for bench press that day. Now, intensity has more to do with the amount of weight or the perceived weight that you're lifting, right? So if you upped the weight on your bench press to 150 pounds, and now you do 3 sets of 5 reps at 150 pounds, if you multiply all that, you get 2,250. So your volume's actually decreased, but your intensity's increased. And so it's not necessarily to suggest that you haven't progressed, right? They're just different adaptations you can pursue. And I think to some of the points you were making, Matt, early on, you may be a bit more sort of volume focused in practicing the movement. Over time, as you get stronger and you want to focus more on strength, you might start to focus more on intensity, but there has to be a balance in both. And just to continue to say the same thing over and over, a good program is going to you're not going to have to worry so much about this because it's going to be programmed in a way to help you pursue both adaptation, which is really important for overall long-term success.
Yeah, I mean, it's that circle of strength again, where, volume becomes the easy way to track success because of its ease to track. I mean, that's the easiest way that a trainer can go to their client and say, look, here, here's how you're progressing. You've lifted, 300 pounds more in this exercise than you did the week before. That's huge progress. And, it's a tool that I use. And it's also really easy, just because it's a really easy way for you to show that success. But what's going to happen if you fall in love with the volume or become obsessed with that volume is you're going to notice a number that you just get kind of stuck at. And, there'll be a week where maybe you're a little bit above it. Then the next week you're going to be a little bit below it. And you're always just kind of having a tough time. You're plateauing at that volume. And, my advice, anytime that happens, and this maybe it's time for a deload, and that's another topic for another day. But more realistically, if you switched up your focus for a couple weeks and went intensity based and thought more about things like the tempo, how violently are you moving that weight, how long or short are your rest periods, how much weight, maybe I can up the weight and it's going to have a significant drop off in my total volume, but I'm going to slowly build up that new weight, and then we'll come back to the other one and see what happens. It's just, you got to use both of them in conjunction with each other to see the most benefit. So there, anybody that's out there saying, "Oh, volume's the only thing that matters," they're full of shit. And the people that are on the intensity side of things, they're liars too, because it's not that simple.
And a good strength training program will program both. So it'll be built into phases where it'll, to your point, so that you don't reach that plateau. Hopefully you can stay ahead of it and switch to a new adaptation to continue to progress. I think you'll hear people talk about hypertrophy versus strength training. It's another way to kind of think about this. Hypertrophy focus, which is typically in those higher rep ranges and is really focused on building targeted muscles, for lack of a simple way of talking about it. And then strength, which is going to be more of the compound movement, deadlift, lower rep. Both have value, right? And so I think the point you just made is super true. You'll notice in our strength training programs that it's going to phase you through both, and that both have value, and that if anybody's telling you one is better than the other, or that maybe they're a bodybuilder, so they're really focused on hypertrophy and high volume stuff, but that's not what we're after here. We're regular old dudes having conversation with regular people that are just trying to get a little bit healthier, better, stronger, whatever it is.
It's important to be strong and to look strong, right? It's important that you can, as just a citizen of the world, in this day and age, like, it is important to be able to, be strong when that moment comes, whether it's just, moving, whether it's, just, anything. It's just doing yard work, doing chores, being
picking
strong,
up your kid off the ground.
picking up your kid. Right. Exactly. It's important to be strong, but also, what fun is being strong if you don't have the fun looking muscles to look strong too. So, unless you are a bodybuilder getting ready for the stage, or, on the other side, a power lifter getting ready for a competition, you want to make sure that you're doing a little bit of both, so that you're being a bit more rounded than either of those individuals.
So as you get a little bit deeper into the world of fitness and nutrition, I think there's some other content out there that we really like that we should probably highlight as really good resources to look to. And I think we kind of think of ourselves as sort of like a feeder program to the Mind Pump guys. They're delivering some incredible content, really from the perspective of experienced trainers. Our goal is to reach the 80% of people that aren't really fitness enthusiasts, to maybe get them a little more excited about fitness, to provide maybe a bigger audience to the Mind Pump guys. But they've got really good programs. They've got really good information. For those of you that do get a bit more into the world of fitness and become a bit more enthusiastic about it, I think that's a great resource to look to.
Yeah, I would not be offended if you listen to those guys, because they are, I mean, they're people that we look up to. I haven't met any of those guys, but I consider all of them mentors because of the way that they talk about fitness, it's really inspired me, and and the way that we're doing this podcast and running our business,
Yeah.
because they're really showing what being honest and taking the time to actually think about the people first, versus what's going to get the most views and what's going to be the best selling opportunity. So those guys are awesome, and but they are a lot of conversations for trainers and people that are already in the space. And then if you want to take it even a step further, you get into the conversations of my boy Jordan Shell, the muscle doc, and the Prescript crew. I am Prescript certified. I've taken a couple different courses, through them. Those guys know more about, muscle mechanics and how to apply that to strength training than, anybody should ever care to learn. But, those guys are talking to, like Shallows down in Miami training, he trains guys getting ready for the NFL draft. He's, guys who are, NFL free agents that are looking to get on a team. They are talking to a very specific crew, and it gets so deep and in the weeds that, fortunately you guys have us guys who are not, not doctors, and can speak a little bit more plainly than those guys. But if you're looking for uh, more in terms of the mechanics of strength training and setups for exercises and reasons to do things a little bit that might look a little either boring or different, you gotta, I'd recommend checking those guys out too.
Yeah, I think at some point we'll do a top 10 people you should be following in the fitness space, and maybe
Ooh, I like that one. That's a
maybe
great
the
idea.
top 10 people you should unfollow. But there's a lot, I think, as we position ourselves in the market here, there's a lot of experts giving information to people that are really excited about fitness. And the gap that we're trying really hard to fill is that gap we've talked about previously. It's for our friends, it's for the people we love, those that aren't enthusiastic about fitness, but would benefit greatly from a fitness pursuit, where fitness isn't the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 thing in their life. But if we can make it number 6, if we can figure out how to make it a component of their life, that they can realize some major benefits from doing that, becoming a little bit healthier. So our lane is really about curiosity, growth, learning, exploration, offering experience from our own journeys, the journey of becoming a more experienced trainer and working with individuals and the trials and tribulations that come with that. We want to bring more value to conversations that are curious, that are about learning, and less about the expertise. But we'll continue to offer you the places to go where, if you want to get deeper, if you want to get a bit more into the weeds, there are resources out there for that.
Yeah. And so with that, to kind of summarize what we've talked about today, you have this, you've shown up to the gym, you've done a little bit of research, and now maybe you've even gotten through that first workout, and you learned about reps and sets, you worked in these rep ranges. But I think it's important, because as you said earlier, the progress is developed afterwards. So now it's after, and what should you expect? What are the things that you're sitting there, minutes a day, a week after you've started training, what are the things that we're supposed to be looking for?
I think we shared a metric in one of the early episodes about the number of people that begin a fitness pursuit and then give it up. And I think a lot of the reasons for that has to do with us living in a society where we do something and we want an immediate response or feedback. Our phones are just these constant little dopamine bombs where we can go in and just get immediate kind of excitement, right? And see immediate results or be immediately stimulated. The fitness journey requires something a bit different. If your expectation is that you're going to show up to the gym for a week and follow this program, and all of a sudden you're going to look in the mirror and see something transformationally different, your expectations are not aligned with reality. Your goals aren't set up in a way for you to be successful. So I think I'm really passionate about thinking a lot about what are the shorter term goals that I can define for myself. What are the things I can pay attention to that are wins when I show up to the gym over the short term, because I know from experience that if you show up over time and you follow a program, it will pay off. You will see the benefit in the mirror. You will see the benefit on the scale. You will feel better. You'll have less aches and pains. All of the things you're after will come. But it's important to know that it is a journey and that there are some little things that you can focus on that will pay you in the short term. Some of it's just about rewarding yourself for showing up, right? It's not easy to do. A lot of people quit. Be proud of yourself for showing up and doing it. It's really important. I think there's a mental health opportunity. You and I have talked a lot about. I've now tried to organize my own workouts where I do less volume in a given day, but try to go to the gym as many days a week as possible, even if it's just for mobility type work, because it's like a free anti-anxiety, antidepressant pill to some degree. And you can look at the studies to support that. I mean, the things it does chemically to your brain are incredible. So there's a lot to this. It's about habitualizing healthy habits that in doing so sort of cascade into more healthy behaviors throughout your life. You'll find that people who start strength training or getting into a fitness program, they identify with that some, and now all of a sudden they're making better food decisions. So there's a million, those are some of the ones that immediately come to mind. I'm sure you have more, but just know, show up over time, you will achieve that ultimate goal, but find ways to reward yourself and find goals and expectations that you can set in the shorter term that put you on a path to that longer term success.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. Like all the other, the other things that I could possibly say are kind of under that subcategory of just, you know, create the habit and good things will come from that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when somebody comes in and says, all right, I'm ready to do it this time. I want to work out 5 days a week. I'm going to only eat whole foods. I'm going to stretch 30 minutes a day on top of my workouts. And I'm going to drink a gallon of water. You just, and that person's going to do it for a day. They're going to post a selfie on Instagram and say, day one, can't, watch my transformation. And then it's going to go silent because you can't bite off, that much of the apple right away.
Mm-mm.
It's just not, Rome wasn't built in a day. Everest was climbed with, started with just one step, whatever analogy you want to use, you gotta just not think that showing up to the gym one day is going to change your life. It's showing up the next day and the day after that. And not every day has to be PRs. Not every day has to be this crazy, this crazy Instagrammable workout. You can go for a walk. You can sit in the sauna. You can drink your water, whatever. And then, you can have a donut because you feel like it.
Yeah.
So it's making sure that your expectations are realistic and making sure that they're based in a place of self-love versus I need to change. So, if you can just, and that part, that part's mental health, that's stuff that, you might need some more, conversations with, actual professionals, to help you develop those mindsets, or, maybe just some positive reading, can help you with that. And I'm sure we will have another podcast or at least a blog or something about, our, favorite books about, positive mindset
Mhm.
and making those changes. But I know the one for me that started it all was Mindset by Carol Dweck. Just a phenomenal book in teaching you about the growth mindset and how you are seeing change as a positive opportunity, not as a, because what you're doing is so bad. So, you gotta make sure that you're taking care of yourself and doing it for the right reasons and not biting off more than you can chew, because then, say you want to do all those things and then you only drink a half gallon of water, you know, you're not a failure. You're a
Which
crazy person.
will inevitably happen. Yeah.
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So,
Rome was built. Everest has been climbed.
too many times.
And there was probably some days those Romans showed up and they didn't achieve that day's work that
God
they'd set out to
damn it.
achieve that day, but they still built Rome.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just about, taking a step forward and then, banking enough of those steps forward so that when you inevitably have a day where you do step back, you're not falling back, further than you started.
Mhm.
So, all right, Dylan, let's wrap this up. Where should our people go from here?
Yeah, so this is sort of the manual from the couch to the gym, or the couch to the living room, or maybe you've never really tried strength training. Maybe you're a former athlete who just hasn't really gotten into fitness in a very long time. That's sort of where we're trying to meet you right now. So you've got either basic home, which you can do in your living room or your basement. You've got basic muscle, which you can take to the gym for the first time to either start or kind of return to fitness and strength training. And hopefully this podcast conversation provides you with a map to make your way through some of the things that can be confusing and in the weeds, because as we just highlighted, a lot of this is in the weeds, but the important thing is just showing up, following a good strength training program, looking to resources like the ones we're trying to provide you to help you navigate it and find good strategies to be successful at it. What do you
Yeah,
think?
and shoot us a message if there is ever anything that you're confused about.
Yeah.
Obviously, please, reach out to me, the basic trainer on Instagram or Facebook, and we just want to help. So that's what we're doing here, and we're gonna just keep on keeping out, churning out stuff for you guys that will hopefully make your transitions back into fitness or into it for the very first time a hell of a lot easier than it was for us. So all I can say for Dylan and myself, thank you all so much for the support and for giving us a chance to make your lives better, because we love doing this and we want to make sure that we can keep doing it for a long time.
Couldn't say it any better.
All right, hey, we'll see you next time.